Hi, everybody. Welcome to our final module in the Love Reaches Out, Outreach and Growth in a Time of Change course. And I'm one of your hosts, Carrie McDonald.
And I'm Sarah Gibb Millspaw.
And we're joined today by two of our fabulous friends and colleagues, Annie Gonzalez-Milliken and Elizabeth Wynn, to talk a little bit about emerging, creative, innovative ministries that take some of the things that we learned about in Module 7, which is about imagining and creating different kinds of new experiences and entry points into your congregational life. And this is about imagining going one step further with that and actually imagining whole new ways of being in faith community that respond to the changes that we're seeing in the neighborhoods around us and in the world that we live in. So, Elizabeth and Annie, do you want to introduce yourselves to our good course takers at home?
Sure. I am Reverend Annie Gonzalez-Milliken. I work in the Office of Youth and Young Adult Ministries, supporting young adult and campus ministries. So that's ministries on college campuses and also young adults age 18 to 35 in general. I'm part of two different UU communities here in Boston. One is a traditional congregation, First Parish in Dorchester, that is a very long history. Another is a much newer community that I've joined recently, called the Sanctuary Boston, that meets at multiple congregations in Wednesday evenings.
And I'm Elizabeth Wynn here at the UUA. I'm the Leadership Development Associate for Youth and Young Adults of Color, so supporting ministry to UU Youth and Young Adults of Color. And one of my spiritual communities is the Lucy Stone Co-op, affordable housing co-op here in Boston, based in the values and tradition of Unitarian Universalism. And I was also on the planning team for that and continue to support our growth and also attend Sanctuary Boston on Wednesday evenings.
Cool. So we just want to have a conversation rather than the typical lecture presentation format with our good friends here to talk a little bit about what we're seeing right now in Unitarian Universalism. Maybe we could just start by talking about the range of creative, emerging, different types of ministries and faith communities that we've started to see in the last few years in Unitarian Universalism. Tell us about the landscape.
Well, something that we talk about sometimes at Lucy Stone is that we have a very theologically diverse faith as Unitarian Universalists, but sometimes we are not institutionally diverse. My mother grew up Catholic, and if I was Catholic and I wanted to go deep in my faith, I might choose to work at a Catholic hospital or a Catholic school or some other sort of large Catholic nonprofit or to be a nun. Like, there are a number of different containers or institutions, and I'm really passionate about creating a diversity of institutions, a diversity of containers for our UU movement. So I think that's part of what we're seeing with some of these communities that are mutual aid societies, evening worships, housing cooperatives. Those are other containers besides the congregational model.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you know, one thing that I think about a lot, because my portfolio is young adults, is what kind of communities might be more accessible to young adults, whether that's because young adults move a lot and really would benefit from cooperative, affordable housing, or whether that's because young adults, Sunday morning is hard, so an evening worship works well, because they really want to gather for hands-on activities. I know there's a network of communities called Sacred Fire UU, and they really focus on gathering to support each other, to go deep in small group ministry, and then also to do hands-on activities together. But it's really not just young adults who can benefit from these new ways of being together. I did my ministerial internship in Davis, California, and they had some housing there that was founded by Unitarian Universalists who were elderly and wanted to have a place to be, going into that old age stage together. They had someone they collectively hired to help out with tasks they needed help with as they aged, and they read their covenant every night before dinner, and it was just really a wonderful manifestation of gathering in Unitarian Universalist faith.
That's awesome. That's great. Talk to us a little bit about how you've seen folks who are UUs who have ideas for new ways of being in faithful community approach those things. Like, how have they started out? How have they thought about relating to different audiences? Like, Annie, I know that you do a lot to support campus ministries, and you can't start a campus ministry by just saying, hey, college students down the road, come to Sunday services. So how have you seen people approach that?
If only it were that easy.
It'd be so great. Well, I think the way that I try to tell people to think about campus ministry is really an approach I believe works in general in a lot of different circumstances, but that's to first of all gather some core people who are really going to be passionate about this work and be able to give a lot to it, because starting anything takes a lot of time and energy, and to really build those strong relationships with the core people, because that will sustain you in the difficult work ahead, to build in those relationships and spiritual practices. But then I really encourage folks to also then, once they're kind of clear on what they want to accomplish, like if you want to reach out to students, like, are you really interested in helping students connect with like some justice work at your church? Are you really excited about having a group that meets on campus where people can come to spiritually recharge after all of their many activities, kind of figuring out where's that little intersection of what you can offer and what people need. But I really encourage folks to then think really broadly about all the different ways to plug in and get a sense of a community. So if you're thinking about a college campus, like maybe faculty and staff attend your congregation, maybe you can reach out to organizations on campus that have similar values, like maybe there's a queer resource center, or maybe there's a group that's working on like immigration issues or racial justice issues that align with our values and principles, and you can kind of start to make those connections as well, and see how that can help with reaching folks.
Interesting to me, listening to what Annie's saying, talking about how to get a campus ministry started, and how much that connects with what we've been saying about outreach in general, especially if a congregation is trying to reach a new group, that you want to have that core of people who are in that group already, who are connected with the congregation, who have that relationship from which to grow it. So, if everybody in your congregation is over 60 and has no affiliation with the university, for example, or if you are trying to start a community garden program to reach the urban neighborhood that you live in and nobody from the church is part of the urban neighborhood, you need to work on building those core relationships first, because that's where things are going to come from. You have to have some overlap in the group that you're trying to reach. And also trying to see it from their context and their perspective, like on campus. I imagine, for example, I went to a liberal arts school where the UU kids felt like their values were pretty much affirmed everywhere all over campus, and didn't necessarily feel a need to gather for values reasons, but maybe for worship reasons or community reasons. That you have to find the niche.
Find that niche,
of what are the people around you who might be engaged in this ministry? What are they not getting elsewhere?
Exactly.
Yeah. I just want to affirm the piece about a team. Before we started Lucy Stone, folks had about 60 one-to-one conversations before a planning team came together. And often, at least I feel like I'm taught that it's the quality of the idea that matters. If I have a really good idea, people should be excited about it and come. And I think what we actually see is there's a lot of good ideas out there, but the people who take the time to sit down one-to-one with people over and over and over to try to figure out who are good partners to bring that idea to life are the folks who, it's not easy, but tend to have a better chance at success. And also to underscore the part about spiritual practice, you have to figure out what works for you, but we sing at the end of all of our meetings. And there's been many a meeting where something was really, really hard, and singing together was one of the ways that we were able to stay at the table and take faithful risks and not know what was going to happen. And then the piece about like what can you offer, I think really resonates. And I think about the congregation I'm affiliated with as a community minister, First Parish in Cambridge, that recently entered into an amazing partnership to host a youth shelter run by students.
Yeah. We'll post a link to that on the course page.
Cool, yeah, and in the sort of the basement floor. And they just took this risk in partnering with this group of folks who had a vision for serving youth who are experiencing homelessness. And they sort of looked around and said, yes, one of our huge assets is space, which is true for many of our congregations. And it was a big leap to figure out the money piece, to figure out the liability pieces, but they really felt like if someone is approaching us because of a gift that we have to share, we owe it to our mission to really push ourselves and see what might be possible. And now they're part of this amazing, still complicated partnership, but that is really flourishing. And the other thing I'll say about that is for Unitarian Universalist Community Co-ops that owns Lucy Stone and our second house, Margaret Mosley, one of the main ways that we've been supported by congregations is through some congregations that have made investments in us, have given us loans to help purchase houses. And so that's another way that a gift that some congregations have, their endowments, are able to support these emerging ministries. And that's a huge, if your congregation has an endowment, that's a huge asset. And I think there's the question of how do we live our UU values with assets like endowments, I think can take us into really exciting places in terms of outreach.